Okay, so is this on the medial or lateral part of the ankle? Okay, I should have asked you first. There's two arteries that you'll palpate in the foot. Posterior tibial is actually the easier one. You're just going to come posterior to the tibia or the medial malleolus. So in between the Achilles and the medial malleolus, we'll just palpate that spot, and then you feel a pulse. Pretty straightforward. So that's all you have to give me. It's posterior to the medial malleolus, and then you can say it's in between that and Achilles. You can, if you have them dorsiflex, which you don't have to do this, they're doing a test, but it can occlude the pulse or diminish the pulse because it puts the tarsal tunnel on tension, which is a kind of a neurovascular tunnel with a bunch of arteries and ligaments. So we'll talk about kind of Tom, Dick, and Harry in a little bit. Alan mentioned that you don't want to forget.
Yeah, Tom, Dick, and Harry is not TDH with the little blurb in the middle. It's tibialis posterior, flex digitorum longus, A and H. Artery, nerve, flexor icis longus. So don't forget that Tom, Dick, and Harry isn't just remembering the three tendons. It's the three tendons and the artery and nerve. They're all behind the medial malleolus.
Does that acronym ring a bell? Do you remember learning about that?
It's also tall, dark, and handsome.
Thank you, Dr. Fila.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the acronym, or you're talking about the palpation instructor?
Actually, he was just telling me that that's.
Oh, okay. And it's tall, dark, and handsome, not and handsome. And handsome, because the D doesn't count for anything.
But you see, then you could say it's tall, dark, and handsome, because you just drop it in.
Tom, Dick, and Blake, nervous area.
All right, we're going to go to the tibialis posterior tendon. So posterior tib, or tibialis posterior, where does this attach? We said it earlier.
Can you say it again?
Posterior tib or tibialis posterior tendon.
Oh.
Navicular? Navicular, right? So that's the one that we drew our imaginary line from the medial malleolus to the first MTP. The first third was the navicular, that bump there. So that's where the posterior tibialis tendon attaches. So it's going to come and wrap around. Right, so this is Tom. This is what we just referred to. It's that those three tendons that run behind the medial malleolus. That first one is Tom, which is tibialis posterior, not tibialis anterior, because these come behind the tibia. So I'll palpate in the space between the navicular and kind of start to come behind the medial malleolus, and I'll have him perform what action for the tibialis posterior? Dorsiflexion is going to be anterior. It's going to be inversion. Plantar flexion. So it's opposite of the anterior. So the anterior is going to bring the foot up, but the way it attaches, remember, it's on the back side of the tibia, it comes and wraps around, it's going to bring the navicular in and down for the foot. That's where it attaches. So I'm palpating here. The tendon is from here to here. So if I'm close to the navicular, it's fine. And I'm going to resist. And I can feel it pop right into my fingers as soon as he does plantar flexion and inversion. Okay? But if I'm underneath the medial malleolus here, it's still correct. I might not feel it as much. So it's kind of in between medial malleolus and navicular. Okay? Extensor hallucis longus. Well, let's go to tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis, and extensor digitorum. So these are the three tendons on top of the foot. Okay? For the tibialis anterior tendon, this is the one that does dorsiflexion. And they all kind of help with dorsiflexion, and you have a lot of tendons on the top of the foot. So what we'll do for the tibialis anterior is, it's more on the medial side of the ankle, as I'll flex his toes to get the extensor hallucis and the extensor digitorum out of the picture, and then ask him to dorsiflex his foot. See that big guy right there? That's the tibialis anterior. Okay, so it's more kind of on the middle side of the foot. So go and relax. So I can just come off of the medial malleolus It also inserts on the cuneiform, so you can travel up from the cuneiforms, since you know where that is. And then hold his toes down and ask him to dorsiflex his foot. Pretty easy, palpate. Then you use that as a reference for the extensor hallucis longus. That's the next one. We're traveling laterally towards the lateral malleolus. So I come off of the tibialis anterior a little bit and ask him to kind of dorsiflex, but now he's extending his toe, and now we get the extensor hallucis longus right next to it. Okay? And then I come a little bit laterally off of that, and we're on the extensor digitorum longus, so he's dorsiflexing and kind of extending all of his toes. And then with those, I'm of course resisting, and that's that one right there. And he can see this. I mean, if you look at this on your foot, you can see those three tendons right next to each other. So it's great, because you got tibialis anterior, you just travel extensor hallucis longus, and then extensor digitorum longus. And then for the dorsalis pedal artery, that's going to be in between the extensor hallucis longus and extensor digitorum longus. So I'm going to bring those guys out like I did earlier. So go ahead and dorsiflex and then resist me. So I have the hallucis and the extensor digitorum. Then I ask them to rest, and I go right in between those two tendons to palpate a pulse, which is the artery, the dorsalis pedal artery. Okay?